Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schwab Coaching. My name is Cameron Mann. I'm a Senior Manager and Education Coach here at Schwab, and this is Getting Started with Thinkorswim. And I think that a lot of our audience members here know Thinkorswim has some fabulous resources for trading. But today, I wanted to focus on what I consider to be my top 5 Thinkorswim tools for those longer-term, more fundamentally oriented investors. Yes, there are tools for investors as well on Thinkorswim. So that's what we're going to give our attention to today. Before we can get to that, though, let me first of all say hello to everybody who's already chatting in out there on YouTube. Hello there, Speak Truth and Jen, Ricebird, Life in the Fast Lane, Alaron, Nirmal, Lawrence, Eva, Austin, everybody else. Thanks for joining us week after week. We really do always appreciate your attendance and your contributions in these discussions. If you're here for the very first time, I want to welcome you as well. And if you're watching on the YouTube archive after the fact, enjoy the presentation, but be aware that you're invited to join us in this live discussion. This is a Monday webcast series that kicks off promptly 3 o'clock Eastern time. We'd love to have you here. And I also want to point out for the benefit of my live stream attendees, my very good friend Kevin Horner is going to be hanging out in the chats. Kevin's going to be helping us with any questions that I can't get to, but Kevin brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to this discussion. Thanks for being there, Kevin. And Kevin and I would also like to issue an invitation to everybody, whether you're watching live or you're watching on the archive. If you're not following us on X, that's a great resource. Best place to connect with your favorite presenters in between the live streams. You can find Kevin on X at Kevin Horner CS. You can find me there at Cameron May CS. But with that said, let's get into this. And the very first thing that we always need to do is to pause and consider the risks associated with trading or investing. These are important disclosures, so bear them in mind. The information here is for general informational purposes only. It should not be considered an individualized recommendation or endorsement of any particular security, chart pattern, or investment strategy. Schwab does not recommend the use of technical analysis as a sole means of investment research. All investing involves risks, including the loss of principal, and any investment decision you make in your self-directed account is solely your responsibility. Okay, so let's set an agenda for the day. Very basic, straightforward agenda. I wanted to give some attention to the investing tools that are available on Thinkorswim. So we're going to be going through what I consider to be my top 5 tools for the longer-term, more fundamentally oriented investor. Now, as we do this, I wouldn't mind if you just chat in, let me know what are your favorite tools for investing on Thinkorswim. That would be interesting. But I'll just take us down through it. I'll give demonstrations of the tools, and we'll do it all on the Thinkorswim desktop platform. So let's go right to Thinkorswim. And let's just sort of start with a broadest view for our fundamentally longer-term oriented investor. Maybe they just like to keep their eye on major developments, economic news, cycles in what's been happening in the headlines. Well, there's a great resource that can be found right here. So we're going to start with the Analyze tab, and we're going to go to the Economic Data tool. Now, how many of you have used this Economic Data tool before? There is just an incredible depth of data available here. For a longer-term investor who just likes to keep an eye on just about any economic development over time, long-term time frames available. But let's say, as our example, maybe our investor, and this is one that's been kind of key for a lot of investors recently, what's been going on with the Fed, what's been going on with interest rates, what's been going on with prices. Well, we have consumer prices, we have producer prices. What about house prices? Any of you who have adult children who are out there looking, or maybe someone's looking to move to a new city? What's been going on with those house prices? Well, I'm going to go to our house price indexes, and we can find all number of different, very specific indexes, or the much wider indices for things like the Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index. Everybody, all right, get ready for this. I know it's uncomfortable. I don't know, it's nice if you're already a homeowner, I suppose. It's not such a great chart if we're looking to purchase, but if I click on this, this is showing us what's been happening with home prices on a national scale, going all the way back to the start of the Case-Shiller Index, way back in the mid-'80s, carrying us all the way through to the current time frame. So this is giving us the maximum view of home prices over time. Now, each of these indices, and I would just suggest you get in here and play around with whichever ones are important to you. If you're an investor and you're trying to keep tabs on these large economic developments. Lots of resources here, but just be aware that just because you might be looking, maybe it's too much information, maybe that's too long of a view, these are customizable. So for example, here I could change the range, or in other words, just the length of the chart from the maximum view. Maybe just want to see what's been going on with home prices over the last year on that national scale. As soon as I select that, it updates our chart and we can see the spike. Now this scale only accommodates what's been happening over the last 12 months. So this can look fairly dramatic, but really on a relative term, we're talking about, percentage point, a few percentage points here, maybe going up 8 or 10%. But you can see, is this a downtick? Interesting new development. But for our investors, this sort of data, depending on one's preferences, can be quite informative. It can be helpful toward the management of that longer term portfolio. So I just wanted to introduce you there to tool number one, that economic data tool. If you need to get back, if you've dug in deeply into one of these data displays, you can just click on the home page and it takes us right back to where we started. All right, so that's tool number one. Now let's get a little bit more granular. So we were looking at on the grand scale. Maybe we're narrowing it down to individual stocks, and maybe our fundamental investor wants to take a peek behind the curtain of what's happening with just the stock chart. Stock charts are great for technically oriented investors and traders, but what if we want to see the relative health of the company behind the stock? Great tool number two can be found right here on the Trade tab. Now, this might be surprising to some. You might have thought, oh, I know where Cameron's headed with this. Actually, if we type in a symbol on the Trade tab, there's going to be a button tucked away over here to the right called the Company Profile. Now, I'd also like to know how many of you have kind of overlooked this Company Profile button here. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and that brings up a pop-up menu, and immediately I'm presented with some information. Now, we just need to know that this information that we're going to be going through is provided by a company called Trefis. Trefis information and estimates are provided by Insight Guru, which is a separate and unaffiliated firm. So be aware of that. There's some more important information that you'll want to read through right there. But for our investor here, what this information is doing is giving us a breakdown of where a big company like Apple derives its value for shareholders. Eva says this company profile, you use it often. There are a couple of different ways that we can access this. So I'll show everybody a different navigation that might take us to this same tool. But yeah, the Trefis breakdown here, you'll notice this is broken into broad business segments. So for Apple, a lot of us are familiar with the fact that, yeah, Apple makes iPhones. Well, how much of the market capitalization is derived from iPhone, from the value of that product line? 42.3%. And if I want to see a little bit more granular detail of that iPhone information, I can click on it here, and over to the right, I can see even a growth trajectory for iPhone revenue. And then I can get into other elements for Apple and where it derives its value. For example, services provided by Apple account for 33.7%. Apple Watch, about 10.4%. Mac computers, 6.3%. Is that surprising to anybody? Essentially 8x the value comes from iPhone versus computer sales. iPad, 5.8%. And so that gets pretty granular. Now, if we want to take a little bit deeper dive into Apple, we can scroll down here. And there's what's called the division overview with some key elements. It's an interesting, very in-depth breakdown of what's happening with Apple specifically. So, for example, what is being offered? Apple's internet services, such as the App Store, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, and on and on. This is what's included in the overview. Who's buying? Apple services cater primarily to iPhone, iPad, Mac users. Competitors include, and it gives us a breakdown here, what buyers care about. Now, this is interesting information, but somewhat limited for the users of this company profile tool. Really, what we're seeing here is a capture of a broader tool that can be accessed on the Analyze tab again. So we already used the economic data tool from that perspective of an investor. Let's say that our investor really wants to get into fundamentals of the same company, Apple. So if I go to that Analyze Fundamentals, I'm going to give this sort of as a 2-for-1. So I'm going to call this top 5 tool number 2, which is the company profile plus the Analyze Fundamentals page. Now this Analyze Fundamentals, if I were to scroll right down to the bottom, we'll be in familiar territory. There's that Trefis, what drives the stock tool. But above that on this page is going to be a breakdown of the company. Yes, we can trade the company right here, but right at the top of this page are the analyst reports. These are downloadable right here. They include, for example, the Schwab equity ratings. Just below that is going to be a summary if we happen to be looking at, I think most of us know who Apple is and what they do, what their major product lines are. But with thousands of publicly traded companies out there, our investor is very likely to encounter some that they don't really know a lot about. So this summary can get one acquainted with a company very quickly, tell us where it's located, how to contact the company, and a 1-paragraph summary of what the company does to generate revenue, what its major product lines are, where its distribution channels exist. All of that captured right here in this summary. And then down below, we start to get into key fundamental metrics that are sometimes used by our value investors who are looking for the longer term, or even for the traders in the shorter term, our growth investors for longer or shorter term. But we can see these key metrics, key growth and value ratios and so on, displayed over time numerically, displayed over time graphically. Just explore this on your own as time permits. And then down below is an expansion of that Trefis Trefis analysis. Valuation highlights. This is going to tell us just key issues for the company specified here. What has changed? Launch of the iPhone 16, the Vision Pro headset. All of this is going to be very specific to the company itself. So I think you can see a lot of information for our longer term investor that we're, hypothetically laying a case here for the tools that are available on Thinkorswim. So that's sort of cool tool number 2. Yes, I realize it's a bit of a cheat. I combined the company profile with this Analyze Fundamentals page, but they're very much related. One is an element of the other. So there's a 2-for-1. So we've looked at broad economic metrics. We've narrowed it down to individual company metrics. Now let's suppose that let's say our investor has a preference for the sorts of metrics they like to see from the company, maybe even performance metrics that they see from different sectors, and they want to find other similar companies. Are there tools that can assist that investor in finding similar companies efficiently? Yes, there are. So that going to bring us to top 5 tool number 3, which is going to be our Stock Hacker. So for our Stock Hacker, this is essentially a scan or a screen or a filter tool. We call it a scan, but it's essentially a search tool that allows the investor to tell Thinkorswim what sorts of characteristics they prefer their company to display. And then Thinkorswim's search engine, it goes out and finds those sorts of companies. And they can be very much fundamentally oriented. So for example, let's say that our investor, maybe they prefer to look for, maybe mid-cap or larger companies. So to create a scan, what we'll do is just start to use the menus here and fill in the blanks. So for our first example, how about we look for companies of a certain market capitalization, a certain size? Now, these values are displayed in millions of dollars. So if I set in a minimum of, let's say, 2,000, that would be 2,000 million. Or in other words, our investor is looking for companies that are at least $2 billion in total market capitalization. That is the price per share times the number of shares outstanding. Okay, so let's say our investor is looking for these sort of big companies, $2 billion companies or larger. Maybe as a second metric, let's say they're looking for maybe let's say a PE ratio that hasn't gotten quote unquote too high. What does that mean? Well, it's just comparing current price to earnings over the last 12 months and looking at that as a multiple. So for example, let's say our company has earned $1 in profits, and let's say it's priced at $20 per share. Well, $20 in price divided by $1 of earnings means that a would-be investor is paying a multiple of $20 or 20 PE multiple. So let's say that our minimum, how about let's say our investor wants a PE ratio of at least 7, a multiple, yes, of at least 7. Why wouldn't they want a lower multiple than that? For some, they might see very low current PE ratios as a sign that investors don't expect what have been strong earnings to continue into the future. That's a possibility. But let's say our investor is looking for PE minimum of 7. Let's put in a maximum of 20. And as we do that, we're going to see a couple of things to note here. This is telling us there are 2,487 publicly traded companies with PE ratios between 7 and 20. And it shows us a little visual slice of the overall distribution of companies with a measurable PE. This is that slice. Eva says, Eva is asking as a request. Actually, that's what I intended to do for this demonstration here, Eva. But yeah, so we have 2,487 companies with a PE between 7 and 20. We have 2,846 companies that are at least $2 billion companies. Yeah, there are 2,800 $2 billion plus companies out there as potential investments. For those that are using that as a metric. But how about, yeah, let's say that our investor is also a dividend investor, and therefore they're looking for a dividend yield. Average yields are a little bit under 2% right now. How about we say that we're looking for at least 3%, at least 50% above average. So our investor, how many choices they have out of that? 2,700 companies paying a better than 3% yield. Really high yields, that might be to some a little bit of a red flag. How about we set that at 6% for our examples there. So 1,100 companies with a yield between 3 and 6. Once again, you can see that our longer-term investor can narrow the field of potential investment candidates using their own preferred metrics very quickly. And it doesn't just have to be from this default menu here. We can also add a separate filter for additional fundamental criteria by choosing the plus add filter menu up here. And we're going to go to fundamental, and then we get a whole new menu of potential screening criteria. So how about, let's say that our investor is looking for yield, they're looking for price compared to earnings, they're looking for company size, and maybe also just flat out profitability is important to them. So how about we go to earnings per share over the trailing 12 months, TTM. So earnings per share, the TTM, whenever you see that, stands for trailing 12 months. How about we just want to see a company maybe having generated at least, who knows, $2 in profits. How many companies have generated that much profit? About 1,900. So there's going to be some overlap among each of these different metrics. Let's do a quick scan and see how many companies meet all of our criteria. So there are some that meet this criteria. There are some that meet this criteria. There are some that meet this. And if we were to draw a Venn diagram of all of those where they all match up, 96 companies meet all those criteria. And here are the first 50 of those. So another great tool, we're going to call that top 5 tool number 3 for that long-term fundamentally oriented investor. So we looked at broad economic criteria. We've looked at individual companies and looked at the analysis metrics that are available for those. We've done a scan. Now let's say that we've selected a company and the investor maybe just trying to keep tabs on what's happening with the news for that company. Well, right over here to the left, under the gadgets, one of the available gadgets is called Live News. Now, it's not always a default gadget. So if you had something else here, let's just switch our gadget just for, let's say we had another watch list going. Well, right up here, the little 3 dots and 3 dashes menu tool or menu icon allows us to switch our gadget. And the gadget that we're going to be using now is called Live News. And what this allows the trader or the investor in this case to do is enter a symbol here. And then this updates in real time with new headlines as they come out regarding a company or news that's broader that might affect that company. So quite commonly, I get the question, hey, Cameron, what happened with this company? It's really moving today. What happened with that company? It's been collapsing in recent weeks. Well, this is where we can come to get the news on Apple. And one key thing to do here is maybe we just look for the word Apple. And as we double click on that, that's going to allow us, actually, let me scroll up a little bit here. There we are. There was just a little bit of a delay. Sometimes when I'm running a webcast, it can put a heavy demand on the bandwidth for the presentation, cause the platform to run just a little more slowly. But when we double click on one of those headlines, it will bring up more information about that headline. We can just read down through the news that might be contained in association with the headline. In any case, that is cool tool number 4. That's 4 out of 5 for our top 5 tools for long-term investors. Quick way to keep tabs on new developments for maybe a longer-term investment. All right. So that brings us to cool tool number 5. And this one's going to be a little bit self-serving, but it also, I think, is going to be very helpful to those that are really just starting to learn about fundamental analysis and that longer-term approach to investing. And that is our education that's available right here on Thinkorswim. I really hope that everybody is availing themselves of all of their educational resources that are available on Thinkorswim and actually outside the platform as well. I have some suggestions for those of you who aren't using the other resources. But for now, we're going to go to the Education tab, and it includes 2 sub-tabs. And cool tool number 5, top tool number 5 for the longer-term investor are going to be here on Education. And I'm going to go right to stocks, since we've been talking about investing for stocks, essentially for the longer term. I'm going to scroll down on this Stocks Education tab, and there are a couple of resources I want to point out for you today. First of all are the courses that are available here. So if someone is just starting to learn about longer-term investing, maybe they have an interest in fundamental analysis, there is a course here called Stock Investing with Fundamental Analysis. It's a written course. It would take a total of 3 hours to work through approximately, but you can go at your own pace, stop and start as needed. And then associated with that are webcasts, just like this one, but they may be more specifically oriented toward that longer-term investing approach. So for example, here's a webcast that I recently did on growth stock investing. Here's one where Connie goes through the basics of just understanding the markets. So you can just check out the proposed recent webcasts here, or you can click on the view all and see even more. But lots of resources that are available to you. This is not an exhaustive list. It's just my own personal list of some tools that I think that a longer-term investor might want to be aware of as they're using the Thinkorswim platform. Don't ever have the impression that Thinkorswim is only for traders. There are some great resources for just about everybody here. But guys, we've accomplished what I wanted to do today to provide this overview of my top 5 Thinkorswim tools for a long-term investor. So we've done that. Everybody, I told you that I was going to give you some other resources that are available to you outside of this platform. Number 1 is the education can certainly continue on our Trader Talks channel on YouTube. So if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do that. It doesn't take, it literally takes a minute, or it takes a second. It doesn't cost anything. You just go down below the display window right now and just click on subscribe. And our Trader Talks channel on YouTube is the very best place to find playlists of previous webcasts. They've already been delivered. You can come here. For example, if I click on that playlist, I can scroll down here. Let's say we have an interest in learning. Who knows? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not investing. Maybe you want to focus on your charting. Here's my webcast series called Advanced charting techniques. Lots of information just for whatever one has a specific interest in. I would say take your time, read through the available video series here, but also you can join our live streams right there. Now, the other suggestion that I have, if you haven't done this yet, is to follow Kevin and me on X. You can find Kevin here at Kevin Horner CS. You can find me on X at Cameron May CS. And it is the very best place to connect with us. Just take a second, make sure that you've followed us. And this is just where you can get like, it's interesting to me what people have to say. Are we going to get a Santa rally this year? That's a tale yet to be told. I'd like to get your input. Do you think we're going to finish the year are still around 6,000? Are we going to, is the S&P going to pop up above 6,000 substantially? Is it going to fall back below 6,000, recover? Or is there going to be a recovery from this little step back that we've had over the last 48 hours or so? That'll be interesting. All right, everybody, but that'll do it. Time for me to let you go. Yes, we do have a survey. Thank you, Kevin, for reposting that. But there is a survey link that's been added for the benefit of those who are here in the live stream. Click that survey link that Kevin has reposted to the chat right now. And as I wrap things up, if you wouldn't mind taking just a moment to give me some honest feedback, it's always appreciated. It's just 2 multiple choice questions, little comments box and a suggestion box. But if you take the time to fill out that survey, I always promise that I'll take the time to read through that data. I read through your comments, and it always helps. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for all of you who've already clicked the like button. It looks like we've already had how many? Let me check here. 23 out of 84 watching the live stream right now have already clicked that like button. That always sounds like applause to me. And it also gives my webcast a boost in the YouTube algorithm when you click that like button. So it's certainly appreciated. If you like one of our webcasts, whether you're watching live or you're watching on the archive, make sure that you click that like button before you go. All right. Everybody, thanks for joining me today. I will see you again next Monday for another, actually, I won't see you next Monday. I'm going to be out of the office next Monday, but somebody else will be here to fill in for me to do another discussion of getting started with Thinkorswim. I'll look for you in my other webcasts between now and then. I'll also look for you on X, but whenever I see you again, until that moment arrives, I want to wish you the very best of luck. Happy trading. Bye-bye.